The summer of 1859 hung heavy over Thornwood Plantation like a suffocating blanket. Nathaniel Worthington stood in his study, a letter trembling in his weathered hands. The words blurred before his eyes, but their meaning was crystal clear. His creditors were closing in, and he had mere weeks before losing everything his family had built over 3 generations. Through the window, he could see the fields stretching toward the horizon, and beyond them, the quarters where over 200 enslaved people lived under his ownership. Among them was a man who had become legend, not just on Thornwood, but across 3 counties. They called him Silas. No one knew his full story. He had arrived at Thornwood 15 years ago, purchased from a broker who spoke of him in hushed, fearful tones. Silas stood 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad as an ox yoke and hands that could snap timber like kindling. Scars crisscrossed his back in patterns that told of unspeakable suffering, and a long mark ran from his left temple to his jaw, a reminder of some past defiance. But it wasn't his physical presence that made men fear him. It was his eyes, dark, penetrating, holding an intelligence that made overseers uncomfortable and visitors uneasy. Silas could read and write, though he hid this carefully. He could calculate figures faster than the plantation accountant, and he possessed a certain quality that Nathaniel had recognized immediately: natural leadership. The enslaved community at Thornwood looked to Silas for guidance, though he never sought the role. When disputes arose, they came to him. When someone fell ill, he knew which herbs would help. When an overseer raised a whip unjustly, somehow the situation would resolve itself before blood was drawn. The overseers hated him for it, but couldn't touch him. Nathaniel had forbidden it years ago, recognizing that Silas kept order more effectively than any amount of brutality ever could. Now, Nathaniel faced an impossible choice. His daughter, Charlotte, was 19 years old, bright, educated, beautiful, and entirely unprepared for the harsh reality about to crash down upon them. When the creditors seized Thornwood, Charlotte would be left with nothing. Worse, she would become prey to every fortune hunter and scoundrel in the territory. Women without protection or means rarely fared well in these times. But Nathaniel had received an unusual offer. Marcus Blackwell, a notorious plantation owner from the neighboring county, had made his interest in Charlotte known. Blackwell was wealthy beyond measure, but his reputation was dark. 3 wives had preceded their deaths under mysterious circumstances. His plantation, Blackmore, was spoken of in whispers, a place where the enslaved disappeared into the swamps, where screams echoed through the night, where even the local magistrate refused to visit. Blackwell had made it clear: marry Charlotte to him, and he would settle all of Nathaniel's debts, allowing him to live out his days at Thornwood in comfort. Refuse, and he would personally ensure the family's complete destruction. Nathaniel had 1 week to decide. That evening, he did something unprecedented. He sent for Silas to come to the main house, alone, after dark. Part 2, the proposition. Silas entered the study with measured steps, his face carefully neutral. In 15 years, he had been inside the main house perhaps 3 times, always for some practical purpose: moving furniture, repairing a window. Never had he been summoned to the master's private sanctuary at night. Nathaniel poured 2 glasses of whiskey, an act so unusual that Silas's eyes narrowed slightly. The plantation owner gestured to a chair. "Sit." Silas remained standing. Some lines, even Nathaniel Worthington didn't cross without consequence. "As you wish." Nathaniel took a long drink, then another. "What I'm about to tell you could get us both killed. What I'm about to ask of you, I have no right, but I see no other path." For the next hour, Nathaniel explained everything: the debts, Blackwell's offer, Charlotte's fate hanging in the balance. And then came the proposition that defied all logic, all law, all social order. "I need someone I can trust to protect her," Nathaniel said, his voice cracking. "Someone strong enough to fight off any threat. Someone intelligent enough to navigate the dangers ahead. Someone who won't be corrupted by power or tempted by wealth. In 15 years, I've watched you, Silas. You're the only person on this plantation, perhaps in this entire godforsaken state, who I believe could keep Charlotte safe. Silas's expression remained unreadable. And how do you propose I do that, Mr. Worthington? A slave protecting a white woman? The very suggestion would see us both hanged. Not if the world believes something different. Nathaniel pulled out a sheaf of papers. These are freedom papers. I would manumit you tonight. But more than that, I have connections. Documents can be created. A new identity, a backstory. You would become Silas Freeman, a free man of color from New Orleans, educated, with a small inheritance. You would come to Charlotte as a business associate, a protector hired by her dying father. And Miss Charlotte? She agrees to this madness. She doesn't know yet. She knows nothing of Blackwell's offer, nothing of our financial ruin. But she will trust my judgment. And once she understands the alternative, what makes you think I would agree? Silas's voice remained calm, but something flickered in his eyes. What makes you think I wouldn't take these freedom papers and disappear into the north before sunrise? Nathaniel met his gaze steadily. Because I've watched you refuse to escape a dozen times when you could have. Because you helped Sarah recover when she nearly died birthing her child, sitting up 3 nights straight. Because you took a beating meant for young Thomas when he accidentally broke the plow. Because despite everything this system has done to you, you still have a conscience. A long silence stretched between them. There's more you're not telling me, Silas finally said. Nathaniel's shoulders sagged. Blackwell has been asking questions about you. Specifically about you. His overseer was here last week, watching you work, asking the hand about you. I don't know why, but I fear he plans something. If he takes Thornwood, you won't just lose your freedom, you'll lose your life. He's known for buying strong men and working them to death in his swamps. Or worse. So this arrangement benefits us both. It gives us both a chance at survival, yes. Silas walked to the window, gazing out at the quarters where his people slept. And the others? What becomes of them when you lose this place? They'll be sold, dispersed to whoever will buy them. I'm powerless to prevent it. Nathaniel's voice broke completely. That shame I carry to my grave. But I can at least save my daughter. And perhaps, in doing so, give you the chance to save more people later. A free man with resources has power a slave never can. Resources? You just told me you're bankrupt. I told you I'm bankrupt here. But I have assets elsewhere, things I've hidden from creditors. Not much, but enough to establish Charlotte somewhere new, somewhere safe. With a trusted protector managing those assets. Nathaniel let the implication hang. Silas turned back from the window. If I agree, I have conditions. Name them. First, the freedom papers must be genuine and complete. Not just for me, but for 3 others, Sarah and her children. They leave with us. Nathaniel swallowed hard. Agreed, though we'll nearly empty what remains. Second, I need to know everything. The complete truth about your finances, about Blackwell, about any danger we might face. No lies, no omissions. You have my word. Third, Silas paused, weighing his next words carefully. Miss Charlotte must know the truth. About me, about where I come from, about this arrangement. I won't begin a deception with the person I'm meant to protect. That's complicated. That's my condition. Nathaniel stared into his glass. She'll be horrified. Refuse, perhaps. Then this conversation ends here. After a long moment, Nathaniel nodded slowly. Very well. I'll tell her tomorrow. If she agrees, we proceed. If not, he spread his hands helplessly. If not, I take my freedom papers and disappear. You'll have to find another solution for your daughter. Fair enough. Nathaniel stood, offering his hand. Then he caught himself. The gesture too dangerous, too familiar. But Silas stepped forward and clasped it firmly. One more thing, Silas said. What happens if we succeed? If I keep her safe, help her establish a new life? What then? Then you'll have earned your freedom twice over, and whatever future you choose to build. And if she comes to depend on me, to trust me? What happens when a white woman trusts a man the world tells her she should fear? Nathaniel had no answer for that. Part 3. Charlotte's Choice. Charlotte Worthington was not the delicate flower her father sometimes imagined her to be. She had grown up reading philosophy alongside poetry, had debated politics with visiting scholars, had secretly borrowed forbidden abolitionist pamphlets from her late mother's hidden collection. She understood far more about the true nature of Thornwood's economy than Nathaniel realized. But she hadn't known about the debts, or about Marcus Blackwell's proposal, or about the man who now stood before her father's desk, free papers in hand, bearing a new name and an impossible task. "This is insane," she said flatly, after Nathaniel finished explaining. Her eyes moved between her father and Silas. "No, Silas Freeman now, supposedly a businessman from New Orleans. You're asking me to flee my home with a man I barely know, to live under a false pretense, I'm asking you to survive," Nathaniel interrupted. "Blackwell will destroy you, Charlotte. You don't know what he is. And you think I should trust instead a man you've held in bondage for 15 years? The bluntness of her statement made Nathaniel flinch. Silas, however, simply met her gaze steadily. "No, Miss Worthington," he said, his voice carrying an educated accent now, one he'd hidden for years. "You shouldn't trust me based on your father's word. You should trust me based on my actions, which you'll judge for yourself in the days ahead. Or you shouldn't trust me at all and choose a different path. But your father is right about Blackwell. That much I know to be true. And how would you know? Because 3 years ago, one of his slaves escaped to Thornwood. She was pregnant, starving, and carried wounds I wouldn't wish on a rabid dog. Your father hid her for 2 weeks before Blackwell's men came searching. We claimed she'd died of fever and showed them a grave we'd prepared. She's alive still, living in the quarters under a new name, her child healthy. I was the one who found her in the swamp. I heard her stories about Blackmore." Charlotte felt the blood drain from her face. "Father? Is this true?" Nathaniel nodded slowly. "I never told you. Wanted to protect you from that knowledge." "Protect me? By keeping me ignorant while I lived 15 miles from a monster?" Her voice rose. "How many other things have you kept from me? How many other truths about this place, about our lives?" "Charlotte, don't." She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Beyond the glass, dawn was breaking over Thornwood. How many more dawns would she see here? "I need to think. Alone. Both of you leave. We have limited time," Nathaniel protested. "Then I suggest you don't waste it by arguing with me." After they left, Charlotte stood in the study for a long time, her mind racing. Everything she'd known was collapsing. Her home, her future, her very understanding of her father, all of it crumbling like sand. But beneath the shock and anger, something else stirred. Curiosity. She had noticed Silas over the years, of course. It was impossible not to. He moved through Thornwood like a force of nature, commanding respect without ever raising his voice. She'd seen him break up fights with a mere look, seen him calculate measurements for a new barn in seconds, seen him speak quietly to a child having nightmares until they calmed. Once, when she was 16, she'd been thrown from her horse during a storm. Silas had found her, carried her 2 miles back to the house through lightning and rain, his face grim with concentration. She'd been conscious enough to feel the gentleness in how he held her, careful not to jar her injured ankle. He delivered her to the house, nodded once to the panicked house servants, and disappeared back into the storm. They'd never spoken of it, but she'd never forgotten. Now, her father was asking her to place her entire future in this man's hands. More than that, he was asking her to flee with him, to live alongside him in close quarters, to depend on him utterly. Society would call it madness. Her friends would be scandalized. Half the county would assume the worst. But what did society know? The same society that smiled at Marcus Blackwell's dinner table while his wives died in suspicious circumstances? The same society that called her father slaves, property, and congratulated him on his humanity for not beating them regularly? The same society that would see her married to a monster to settle a debt? Perhaps madness was exactly what the situation required. Charlotte opened the door and called for them to return. "I have conditions," she announced. Silas almost smiled. "It seems conditions are popular this evening. First, I want the complete truth. About everything. The finances, the dangers, the plan. I'm not a child to be protected from reality." "Agreed," Nathaniel said. "Second, I want to speak with the woman from Blackmore, the one you hid." I need to hear her story directly. Nathaniel looked uncomfortable, but Silas nodded. I'll arrange it. Third, she turned to face Silas directly. I want your word that if at any point you wish to leave, to take your freedom and go your own way, you'll tell me honestly. I won't be the chain that binds you, not even a comfortable one. Something shifted in Silas's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. You have my word, Miss Worthington. Call me Charlotte. If we're to do this impossible thing, let's at least dispense with some pretenses. Part 4. The Woman from Blackmore. Her name was Ruth, though everyone at Thornwood knew her as Rebecca. She was perhaps 30, though suffering had aged her. She met Charlotte in the quarters that evening, Silas standing guard outside to ensure privacy. For an hour, Ruth told her story. She spoke haltingly at first, then with gathering strength, describing Blackmore in detail that made Charlotte's hands tremble. Blackwell ran his plantation like a kingdom and himself as an absolute monarch. Those who pleased him lived relatively well. Those who didn't disappeared into the swamps to work clearing land, sleeping in chains, dying of fever and exhaustion. But the true horror wasn't the labor, it was his capriciousness. A man might be in favor one day and in the swamps the next, for no reason beyond Blackwell's mood. And his wives? Ruth had been a house servant, had seen things. Blackwell's cruelty went beyond physical. He was a master of psychological torment, breaking spirits slowly, methodically. His first wife had thrown herself from a balcony. His second had simply stopped eating. His third had died of pneumonia after Blackwell discovered her writing letters to her family describing her situation. He wanted me, Ruth said quietly. When I rejected him, he sent me to the swamps. When I still refused, he had his overseer beat me in ways that wouldn't show. When I escaped, I was 3 months pregnant with his child. He'd have killed us both if I'd stayed. Charlotte felt bile rise in her throat. Your child is healthy and beautiful and knows nothing of her father. Silas delivered her himself when the midwife was afraid. He's kept our secret all this time. After Ruth left, Charlotte sat in silence for a long time. Silas returned, remaining respectfully by the door. Thank you for arranging that, Charlotte finally said. It was illuminating. Truth usually is. My father thinks Blackwell will come for me regardless of whether we flee. That he's the kind of man who doesn't accept rejection. Your father is right. So running isn't cowardice. It's survival. I would say it's strategy. Charlotte looked up at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as a slave, not as property, but as a man, intelligent, capable, and far more than Thornwood's system had ever acknowledged. Tell me something, she said. If you could have escaped years ago, why didn't you? Truth. Silas was quiet for a moment. Because I learned something in my youth before I came here. I learned that survival sometimes means staying, not running. That you can't help your people if you abandon them. That freedom isn't just about chains. It's about dignity, community, purpose. I stayed because leaving would have been the easy choice. And nothing worth doing is ever easy. And now, you're leaving them. Now, I have the chance to help in a different way. With resources, with freedom to act, I could do more than I ever could here. Your father promised me money to establish myself. That money can help others escape, can fund the Underground Railroad, can make a difference beyond these fields. Sometimes staying is the right choice. Sometimes leaving is. Knowing which is which, that's wisdom. Charlotte stood and walked closer to him, close enough that he could have reached out and touched her, though he kept his hands carefully at his sides. I'm afraid, she admitted, of Blackwell, of the unknown, of what happens next. But I'm also. She paused, searching for words. I'm curious about what life could be outside these walls, about who I might become without society's expectations crushing me, about what we might accomplish together if we're brave enough to try. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, Miss Charlotte. It's acting despite it. Then let's be brave together. When do we leave? 3 days. Your father will announce you're traveling to visit relatives in Baltimore. We'll leave publicly, respectably. Once we're clear of the county, we'll change direction and disappear. Where will we go? North. Eventually. But first, we have debts to pay and people to help. Your father has resources scattered in 4 cities. Money, property, investments made under false names to hide them from creditors. We'll need to liquidate them carefully. And we have 3 people to shepherd to freedom before we can think about ourselves. Ruth and her children. Yes. You planned this before tonight, didn't you? Before my father ever proposed this arrangement. The corner of Silas's mouth quirked. Let's just say I'm a man who believes in contingencies. Freedom papers have a way of appearing at opportune moments if you're patient and plan carefully enough. Charlotte laughed despite everything, a slightly hysterical sound that she cut off quickly. My God, you're terrifying, only to those who deserve to be terrified. And me? Should I be terrified of you? Silas met her eyes. I have never harmed an innocent person in my life, and I don't intend to start now. Whatever else happens, Charlotte, you're safe with me. That's a promise. She believed him. Perhaps that made her naive, or foolish, or reckless. But she believed him. 3 days, then. I should start preparing. Pack light. Only what you can carry. We'll need to travel fast if trouble comes. Will it? Count on it. Men like Blackwell don't give up easily. And your father's creditors won't accept defeat gracefully. We'll have problems. The question is whether we're clever enough to stay ahead of them. Charlotte smiled, a fierce expression that would have surprised anyone who thought of her as delicate. Then I suppose we'd better be very clever indeed. Part 5. The Departure. The 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Nathaniel worked frantically to convert hidden assets into portable wealth. Bonds, letters of credit, gold coins sewn into hidden pouches. Silas coordinated with the underground network that had operated secretly around Thornwood for years, arranging safe houses and contacts. Charlotte packed and repacked, trying to decide what pieces of her old life she could bring into her new one. On the morning of departure, Marcus Blackwell arrived unannounced. Charlotte was in the garden when she heard the commotion. Horses, men's voices, her father's strained greeting. She hurried toward the house, arriving just as Blackwell dismounted. He was handsome in a cold, refined way. Tall, impeccably dressed, with steel-gray eyes that assessed everything with the calculation of a predator. He smiled when he saw Charlotte, but the expression never reached those eyes. Miss Worthington, a pleasure to finally make your formal acquaintance. Mr. Blackwell. She kept her voice neutral, grateful for years of practice at social niceties. Your father tells me you're departing for Baltimore today. Unfortunate timing. I had hoped we might become better acquainted. A family obligation, I'm afraid. My aunt is unwell. Of course. His smile widened slightly. Though I wonder if your father mentioned the business proposition I've extended. It would benefit both our families tremendously. He mentioned something, yes. I told him such matters are his concern, not mine. How refreshingly old-fashioned, though I believe modern young ladies often have opinions on their own futures. Don't you? The threat in his voice was subtle, but unmistakable. Charlotte forced herself to smile. My opinion is that my father's judgment has always been sound. I trust him to make appropriate decisions. Blackwell's eyes narrowed slightly. He was about to respond when Silas appeared from the direction of the stables, leading Charlotte's horse, saddled and ready for travel. He wore the clothes of a free man now, a simple but well-made suit, a hat, and boots. He moved with the confidence of someone who had every right to be there. Blackwell's entire demeanor changed. His body tensed, his hand moving unconsciously toward the pistol at his belt. Who is this? Silas Freeman, Silas said calmly, before Nathaniel could speak. I'm escorting Miss Worthington to Baltimore. Mr. Worthington hired me to ensure his daughter's safe passage. You're... Blackwell's voice dripped venom. A free Negro. I am. From New Orleans originally, though I've lived in many places. Silas's voice remained perfectly polite, but his posture had shifted subtly, balanced, ready. Charlotte recognized a fighter's stance when she saw one. Nathaniel, Blackwell said, not taking his eyes off Silas. You're sending your daughter north with this man? With several escorts, Nathaniel interjected quickly. My man Thomas will accompany them, along with servants. all perfectly proper. It was a lie. Thomas would turn back before they reached the county line, but it served the moment. Blackwell looked between them, his jaw tight with barely contained fury. I see. How progressive of you. He turned back to Charlotte. Miss Worthington, before you depart, might I have a private word? Just a moment of your time. Every instinct screamed at Charlotte to refuse, but declining might raise more suspicion. Of course. The parlor, perhaps. She led him inside, keenly aware of Silas's eyes following them. In the parlor, Blackwell wasted no time on pleasantries. Your father is making a grave mistake, he said flatly. His debts come due in 2 weeks. Without my intervention, he loses everything. This house, the land, even his freedom potentially. Debtor's prison is a grim place. I'm sure he understands the situation. Does he understand mine? I could have any woman I want, Miss Worthington. I chose you out of respect for your family's name. But my patience has limits. Then perhaps you should choose someone else. Someone who would appreciate the honor more than I. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but enough to demonstrate control. You think you're clever, don't you? Think you'll run north with your Negro guardian and start some kind of new life? Let me be clear, that won't happen. I have resources. I have men. I have connections that span from here to Canada. If you refuse me, I'll make it my personal mission to destroy you and everyone you care about. Charlotte met his eyes steadily, though her heart hammered. Take your hand off me. Or what? The door opened. Silas stood there, his expression unreadable but his presence filling the space. The horses are ready, Charlotte. We should depart if we're to make the first way station before dark. Blackwell released her wrist slowly, his eyes never leaving Silas. You're making a mistake, both of you. I'll see you both ruined for this. Mr. Blackwell, Silas said quietly, a man who needs to threaten a woman to win her attention has already ruined himself. The rest is just details. For a moment, Charlotte thought Blackwell might draw his pistol. His hand twitched toward it, his face flushing dark with rage. But they were in Nathaniel's house, with witnesses nearby. Even Blackwell couldn't murder someone so openly without consequences. You'll regret this, he hissed. All of you. He stormed out, mounting his horse and departing in a cloud of dust. Charlotte's legs felt weak, but she kept her composure until he was out of sight. Then she sagged slightly, and Silas's hand steadied her elbow, briefly, properly, but firmly enough to transfer strength. You were right, she murmured. You won't let this go. No, which means we need to leave now, and we need to move fast. Are you ready? Charlotte thought of everything she was leaving behind. Her home, her friends, her entire world. Then she thought of Blackwell's eyes, cold and possessive, and Ruth's broken voice describing Blackmore. I'm ready. Part 6, The Journey. They rode hard for the first 2 days, pushing the horses to their limits. Thomas turned back as planned, carrying letters for Nathaniel, and taking the main road. Charlotte, Silas, and 3 others, Ruth and her children, took a winding route through back trails and forest paths. Silas knew the country intimately, every creek crossing and hidden hollow. He'd spent 15 years memorizing escape routes. He explained quietly one evening. Never thought I'd be using them like this, though. They traveled mostly in silence, speaking only when necessary. Ruth's children, a 4-year-old boy named Samuel and an infant daughter named Hope, were remarkably quiet, as if they understood the gravity of their situation. Charlotte found herself bonding with Samuel, telling him stories to distract him from the long, hard riding. On the 3rd night, they reached the first safe house, a Quaker farm on the Pennsylvania border. The family there asked no questions, provided food and rest, and sent them on their way before dawn with supplies and directions to the next station. How many of these places are there? Charlotte asked as they rode. Hundreds, Silas replied. The Underground Railroad has more stations than most people realize. Good people doing dangerous work to help those escaping bondage. You've used this network before. It wasn't a question, but Silas answered anyway. I've helped 15 people escape over the years. Sometimes just advice, sometimes guiding them to the first station. Never had the resources to go with them before. Freedom papers don't appear from nowhere. How did you manage it this time? The papers, I mean. My father didn't have time to arrange everything properly. Silas was quiet for a moment. Your father didn't arrange them. I did. Been working on them for 3 years, saving every penny I could earn or trade for, bribing the right people, calling in favors. Had them ready, just waiting for the right moment. So you knew. You knew you'd leave eventually. Knew I'd have to. Question was when and how. Your father's crisis just accelerated the timeline. Gave me a purpose beyond just escaping. Charlotte absorbed this. You could have left without us. Without this complication. Could have. But then Ruth and her children would still be trapped. And you'd be married to Blackwell, or worse. Sometimes the complicated path is the right one. They rode in companionable silence for a while. Charlotte found herself studying Silas when she thought he wasn't looking. He moved with a peculiar grace for such a large man, anticipating terrain changes, reading the forest around them with the skill of someone who'd lived close to nature his entire life. But it was more than physical competence. He had a quality of assured calm that made her feel safe despite the danger surrounding them. On the 4th evening, as they made camp in a grove hidden from the main road, Charlotte finally voiced the question that had been bothering her. Tell me your real story. Not Silas Freeman from New Orleans. Your actual history. He looked at her across the small, carefully shielded fire. Ruth had taken the children a short distance away to settle them for sleep, giving them privacy. That's a long tale, and not a pleasant one. We have time, and I think I deserve to know who I'm trusting with my life. Silas stared into the flames for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. I was born free, in Philadelphia. My father was a freedman, a craftsman, a cooper, made the finest barrels in the city. My mother had been enslaved, but earned her freedom, married my father, had dreams of their children living as free people. They sent me to school, taught me trades, raised me to believe I had a future. When I was 19, I traveled to Virginia with my father to deliver an order, a mistake we didn't realize until too late. We stayed at an overnight. In the middle of the night, men came. They took my freedom papers, claimed they were forgeries. Took my father too. We were sold the next day. My father, he didn't survive. Tried to fight back, tried to prove who we were. They beat him until he couldn't stand, then beat him more. He died 3 days later. Never saw him buried. Never knew where they put him. I survived by being smart enough to hide what I knew, strong enough that no one wanted to break me completely, and patient enough to wait for the right moment. Been waiting for 15 years. His eyes lifted to meet hers. Now the moment's here. Charlotte felt tears on her cheeks. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine. Don't. His voice was firm, but not unkind. Don't apologize for something you didn't do, didn't cause, couldn't prevent. That helps no one. What helps is what you're doing now. Seeing people as people, making choices that honor dignity over tradition, risking your own safety to help others gain freedom. It's not enough. It's more than most do. Change happens one choice at a time, Charlotte. One person deciding to be brave, then another, then another. Eventually, enough people make brave choices that the whole rotten system comes down. That's what I believe, anyway. Is that why you stay at Thornwood? To encourage those brave choices. Partly. Also because running alone saves one person. Building networks, teaching people, creating systems, that saves many. I couldn't do that running. Could barely do it staying, but I did what I could. And now I can do more. With freedom, with resources, with connections to people who are actually fighting this evil instead of just enduring it. Your father's money won't just secure your future, Charlotte. It'll help fund the railroad, support fugitives, maybe even help purchase some people's freedom outright. That's worth more than my personal comfort ever could be. Charlotte wiped her eyes. You're remarkable. You know that, don't you? I'm just a man doing what needs doing. Remarkable is when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. You're doing that right now. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being afraid that you make fatal mistakes. Ruth approached then, and they shifted conversation to practical matters, tomorrow's route, supplies, the condition of the horses. But Charlotte lay awake long after the others slept, staring up at the stars through the canopy, thinking about everything Silas had endured and somehow transformed into strength rather than bitterness. Part 7. The Pursuit. They reached Baltimore 8 days after leaving Thornwood. The city was overwhelming after the rural isolation. Noise, crowds, the smell of the harbor, the press of humanity everywhere. Charlotte had visited before, but never like this, never as a fugitive looking over her shoulder. Silas led them to a modest boarding house in a neighborhood where questions weren't asked. The owner, a free black woman named Esther, greeted Silas warmly and showed them to rooms without comment on their unusual group. "You've got 3 days, maybe 4 before word spreads," Esther said. "Baltimore's got eyes everywhere, and Mr. Blackwell's men have been asking questions up and down the coast. You need to move fast." "We need to liquidate assets first," Silas replied. "Charlotte's father has holdings here we need to convert to cash and portable securities." "Then you'd better start immediately. I'll put word out that you're looking for quick transactions, but you'll get less than fair value. Everyone knows desperation when they smell it." The next 3 days were a whirlwind. Charlotte, dressed in clothes more suited to a merchant's daughter than plantation gentry, accompanied Silas to meetings with bankers, traders, and investors. She quickly realized that her presence helped. A white woman lent legitimacy to Silas's transactions in ways that pained her to acknowledge, but were undeniably useful. They managed to convert 3 properties and several investments into negotiable bonds and gold, though at significant loss. Still, it was enough. Enough to start over, enough to help others, enough to survive. On the 4th morning, Esther woke them before dawn. "Blackwell's men are in the city. 6 of them, asking about a white woman traveling with a large Negro man. You need to leave now." They were packed and moving within 20 minutes. Ruth and her children had already departed the previous day on a ship bound for Canada. Tearful goodbyes exchanged in the pre-dawn darkness. Now it was just Charlotte and Silas, racing against time. They boarded a northbound train, tucking themselves into a colored car where Silas would draw less attention. Charlotte, in simple traveling clothes with her hair hidden under a plain bonnet, could pass for a working-class woman. No one looked twice at them. As the train pulled away from Baltimore, Charlotte finally allowed herself to breathe. They were safe. For now. Part 8. The Truth Revealed. They settled temporarily in Philadelphia, the city of Silas's birth. It was bittersweet for him, Charlotte could tell, returning to a place that held both beautiful memories and terrible loss. But it was also the perfect place to disappear, large enough to hide in, connected enough to the railroad network to be useful, far enough north to offer some protection. They rented a small house in a mixed neighborhood where their arrangement raised fewer eyebrows. Charlotte presented herself as Silas's employer, a widow who'd hired him to manage her late husband's business interests. It was a thin fiction, but it served. Over the following months, they fell into a rhythm. Silas used their resources to help fugitives, arranging transport, providing safe houses, funding escapes. Charlotte discovered a talent for organization and planning, coordinating networks of supporters and managing the complex logistics of moving people to freedom. They worked well together, their partnership deepening into genuine friendship. Silas taught her to see the world from perspectives she'd never considered. Charlotte challenged him to imagine futures beyond mere survival, to dream of what freedom might truly mean. But the question that had hung between them since that first night at Thornwood remained unspoken. What were they to each other, really? The answer came on a cold February evening, 6 months after they'd fled. Word arrived that Nathaniel had died, peacefully, in his sleep, before the creditors could take Thornwood. It was a mercy in its way. Charlotte wept, and Silas held her through the grief, steady and strong. "He gave me a chance," she said finally, her tears soaking into Silas's shirt. "Not just at survival, but at living. Really living on my own terms." "He gave us both that chance," Silas replied quietly. "Strange how sometimes the right thing happens for complicated reasons." Charlotte pulled back to look at him. "What are we doing, Silas?" "This life we're building. It exists in shadows and lies. Is this sustainable? Probably not. but it's what we have. What if we wanted something different? Something more honest? He studied her face carefully. What are you asking, Charlotte? I'm asking what happens when the protector becomes something more than that. When trust becomes affection. When partnership becomes... She paused, searching for courage. When I stop thinking of you as the man who saved me and start thinking of you as the man I choose. Silas was very still. The world wouldn't permit such a choice. The world doesn't get to decide my choices. I learned that from you. Charlotte, the consequences. I know the consequences. I've counted them every day for 6 months. Society's judgment, legal complications, danger from people like Blackwell who would use any excuse to destroy us. I know all of it. She took his hands in hers, a gesture that would scandalize anyone who saw it. But I also know that you're the best man I've ever known. That I trust you with my life and my future. That when I imagine tomorrow, I can't picture it without you in it. You could have anyone, Silas said, his voice rough with emotion. Without me complicating everything, you could rebuild your life, find someone society would accept. I don't want what society accepts. I want what's true. And the truth is that I love you, Silas Freeman. I love your strength and your kindness and your brilliant mind. I love how you've transformed suffering into purpose, how you protect people without dominating them, how you dream of a better world and actually work to create it. I love you, and I'm tired of pretending that's not the most important truth in my life. Silas closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. I've loved you since the night you insisted on knowing the truth about everything. Since you demanded honesty instead of accepting comfortable lies. Since you looked at me and saw a person instead of category. But Charlotte, loving you means wanting what's best for you, and I don't know if I am. She kissed him. It was clumsy and desperate and perfect, silencing his protests with action. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Let me decide what's best for me, Charlotte whispered. I've spent 19 years letting others make my choices. I'm making this one myself. The question is whether you want the same thing. Want it? God, Charlotte, I wanted it so badly I barely let myself think about it. But wanting and having are different things. The law. We'll go where the law is different. Canada, maybe, or stay here and dare the world to stop us. I don't care which, as long as we're together. Silas pulled her close, holding her like she was something precious and fragile and fierce all at once. Then yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to building something real together. Yes to whatever comes next, as long as we face it as partners. As equals, Charlotte corrected. As equals, he agreed, and kissed her again. Part 9. The final confrontation. Their happiness lasted 3 weeks before Marcus Blackwell found them. He came with 6 men, heavily armed, in the middle of the night. They broke down the door with brutal efficiency, dragging Charlotte from her bed while Silas fought like a demon in the hallway. But 6 against 1, even when the one was Silas, ended only one way. They beat him unconscious and bound him. Charlotte screamed until one of them struck her across the face, splitting her lip. Enough, Blackwell said, stepping through the wreckage. He looked older than Charlotte remembered, harder. You've led me on quite a chase, Miss Worthington. Did you think I wouldn't find you? That I'd simply accept your rejection and move on? You have no authority here, Charlotte spat, tasting blood. We're in Pennsylvania. Your southern laws mean nothing. Laws are flexible when you have enough money and the right connections. I've already spoken with the local magistrate. You're traveling with a fugitive slave. I have documentation that this man is stolen property from a Virginia plantation. The Fugitive Slave Act is quite clear on such matters. Those papers are forged. Silas is a free man. Is he? How convenient that his freedom papers appear just as you flee your father's debts. How convenient that a slave matching his description was reported missing from a Virginia estate 3 weeks ago. The magistrate found my evidence quite compelling. Charlotte's blood ran cold. Blackwell had manufactured everything, created a false paper trail that would hold up in any Southern sympathetic court. In Philadelphia, despite being Northern, had plenty of judges willing to enforce the Fugitive Slave Act. What do you want? She asked, though she already knew. The same thing I've always wanted. You. Marry me, and I'll drop all charges against your friend. He can go free, head to Canada, live whatever life he chooses. Refuse, and he'll be shipped south in chains, sold to the worst plantation I can find, and work to death in fields where no one will ever hear his name again. Your choice, my dear. Silas stirred, blood running down his face. Charlotte, don't. One of Blackwell's men kicked him viciously in the ribs. Silas gasped but said nothing more, his eyes locked on Charlotte's face. I need time to think, Charlotte said. You have until dawn. My men will wait outside. Try to escape, and the offer vanishes. Blackwell smiled coldly. I've waited this long. I can wait a few more hours. After they left, Charlotte knelt beside Silas, helping him sit up despite his bound hands. His ribs were likely cracked, his face swelling already, but his eyes were clear. You can't agree to this, he said immediately. Charlotte, you can't. I can't let you die for me. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. That's not freedom. That's just trading one prison for another. Then what do we do? He has us trapped. The law, fake as it is on his side. If we run, he'll pursue us forever. If we fight, we'll lose. You saw how many men he has. If I refuse, he'll destroy you. What option does that leave? Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, painfully, he smiled. The option we've always had. The one we've been using for months. We get clever. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Blackwell has made several mistakes. First, he assumed we're alone. We're not. We have friends, connections, a whole network of people who owe us favors for helping them escape bondage. Second, he assumed the magistrate he bribed is the only one who matters. But Philadelphia has multiple courts, multiple jurisdictions. Third, and most importantly, he assumed we'd play by his rules. We won't. Charlotte's mind began racing, seeing the threads Silas was weaving. We need to move fast, before dawn. We need to move now. Can you get to Esther's contact? The lawyer, Thomas Morris? The one who specializes in fugitive cases. Yes, but it's the middle of the night. Wake him. Tell him everything. We need injunctions, writs, whatever legal weapons he can muster. Meanwhile, I need you to send word to the railroad network. Every conductor, every station master, every sympathetic voice in this city. We're calling in every debt, every favor, every connection we've built. They'll arrest you the moment dawn comes, Silas. Legal maneuvers take time we don't have. Then we don't let dawn come quietly. We make it loud. We make it public. We make it impossible for Blackwell to act without the whole city watching. Slavery persists in shadows. Charlotte, let's drag this into the light. For the next 4 hours, Philadelphia's anti-slavery community mobilized with stunning efficiency. Charlotte raced through the night, waking sympathizers, lawyers, journalists, activists. Silas, despite his injuries, used their connections to spread word through the black community. Freedom was under attack, and one of their own needed help. By dawn, Marcus Blackwell's hired lodging was surrounded by over 200 people. Free blacks, Quakers, abolitionists, curious citizens drawn by rumors of injustice. Someone had brought a printing press and was distributing broadsides describing Blackwell's manufacture charges. 3 lawyers stood ready with legal documents. 2 journalists from anti-slavery newspapers had already begun writing stories. When Blackwell emerged, confident and smiling, he stopped short at the sight of the crowd. Mr. Blackwell, Thomas Morris called out, his voice carrying across the assembly. I represent Silas Freeman, a free man of color being unlawfully detained under fraudulent charges. I have here his genuine freedom papers, testimonies from Philadelphia residents who knew him as a free man before his capture in Virginia, and documentation proving that the property claim you filed is fabricated. I've also filed injunctions with 3 separate courts blocking any attempt to transport Mr. Freeman out of Pennsylvania pending a full hearing. This is outrageous. What's outrageous, Morris continued, is your attempt to kidnap a free man using false documentation. That's a federal crime, Mr. Blackwell. You're not in Virginia anymore. Here, such actions have consequences. The crowd murmured agreement. Blackwell's men looked nervous, their hands moving away from their weapons. Violence wasn't an option, not with this many witnesses. Charlotte stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "I will never marry you, Mr. Blackwell. Not today, not ever. You represent everything I despise. Cruelty disguised as civility, power without conscience, the belief that people can be owned and controlled. You came here thinking your money and threats would be enough. But you forgot something important. Some people can't be bought, can't be intimidated, can't be broken. You'll regret this," Blackwell snarled. "Both of you. I'll make sure. You'll make sure of nothing," a new voice interrupted. A U.S. Marshal pushed through the crowd, his badge glinting in the dawn light. "Marcus Blackwell, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, attempted kidnapping, and conspiracy to violate the civil rights of a free citizen. You'll be coming with me." Blackwell's face went purple with rage. "On whose authority?" "Federal authority. Seems your activities caught the attention of some important people in Washington. People who are tired of Southern plantation owners abusing the Fugitive Slave Act to kidnap free citizens. You become an example, Mr. Blackwell. Congratulations." As the marshal led Blackwell away in chains, a delicious irony that wasn't lost on anyone present, the crowd erupted in cheers. Silas, freed from his bonds by friendly hands, made his way to Charlotte. They stood together as the sun rose over Philadelphia, battered but victorious. "Is it really over?" Charlotte asked. "With Blackwell? Yes. He'll be tied up in legal battles for years, and his reputation is destroyed. Even if he's eventually acquitted, he won't have the resources or credibility to pursue us further. And us? What happens to us now?" Silas took her hand, publicly, defiantly, in front of 200 witnesses. "Now we stop hiding. We build the life we want, together, and dare anyone to tell us we can't." Epilogue. 3 years later. The house in Philadelphia had grown over the years, not in size, but in purpose. What had started as a simple residence had become a hub for the Underground Railroad, a meeting place for activists, and a school where formerly enslaved people learned to read and write. Charlotte stood in the main room, now converted to a classroom, watching Silas teach a group of eager students. He'd become a prominent figure in Philadelphia's anti-slavery movement, his story of kidnapping and freedom widely known. His voice carried weight in councils and courts, his testimony helping to free dozens of falsely accused fugitives. She'd found her own calling, writing. Her articles about slavery's cruelty, published under her own name, reached newspapers across the North. Her first-hand account of Blackwell's attempt to force her into marriage had become a powerful weapon in the fight against Southern aristocratic impunity. They'd never married. It would be illegal for years yet, and neither felt the need for legal sanction anyway. They were partners in the truest sense, equals building something meaningful together. Ruth and her children had thrived in Canada. Her letters arrived, monthly, full of news about their life and freedom. Samuel was in school, Hope was learning to walk, and Ruth herself had remarried, a kind man who treated her children as his own. Nathaniel's final gift, beyond the resources he'd hidden, had been a letter delivered posthumously. In it, he'd apologized for the system he'd participated in, thanked Silas for being a better man than he'd ever managed to be, and blessed Charlotte's choice to forge her own path. It was an imperfect absolution, but it meant something. Marcus Blackwell had been convicted of fraud and served 2 years in prison. Broken financially and socially, he'd retreated to what remained of Blackmore, a shadow of his former self. His wives' families had finally come forward with their own stories, and the truth about his cruelty had become public record. Justice delayed but not denied. As for Thornwood, it had been sold to pay Nathaniel's debts. The enslaved people there had been scattered, but Charlotte and Silas had managed to purchase freedom for several families, reuniting them in the North. It wasn't enough, it could never be enough, but it was something. The war everyone knew was coming drew closer each year. Tensions between North and South escalated monthly. Charlotte and Silas both understood that their personal victory was just one small battle in a much larger war. But they also knew that every person freed, every mind changed, every act of resistance mattered. That evening, after the students had left and the house had grown quiet, Charlotte and Silas sat together on their small porch, watching the sunset paint Philadelphia gold and crimson. "Do you ever regret it?" Charlotte asked. "Everything that happened, all the danger and difficulty?" Silas was quiet for a moment, considering. "I regret what it took to get here, the suffering, the injustice, the years lost. But this," he gestured to the house, to their life, to her. "This I would choose 1,000 times over. You taught me something, Charlotte. You taught me that freedom isn't just about broken chains. It's about choosing your own path, building your own future, loving who you choose to love. That's a freedom I never imagined possible." "My fierce protector," Charlotte said softly, leaning against him, "who turned out to be so much more." "My brave partner," Silas replied, kissing her forehead, "who never let fear stop her from doing what was right." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, two people who had defied every expectation, overcome every obstacle, and built something beautiful from the ashes of an unjust system. The road ahead would be long and difficult. The fight for true freedom and equality would consume decades, generations even. But sitting there together, they felt something rare and precious. Hope. Hope that change was possible. Hope that love could transcend society's barriers. Hope that ordinary people making extraordinary choices could reshape the world. And in that hope, they found the strength to keep fighting, keep building, keep believing in a future where everyone, regardless of color, status, or origin, could live freely, love openly, and die knowing they'd made the world a little bit better. The plantation owner had handed his daughter to the most feared slave, and no one could have imagined what would happen. Not the partnership that would form, not the love that would bloom, not the revolution that would spread from two people refusing to accept the world as it was. But perhaps that was the most important lesson, that the future is never written in stone, that courage and compassion can overcome even the darkest circumstances, that sometimes the most unexpected alliances create the most powerful change, and that love, real love, built on respect and equality and shared purpose, is the most revolutionary act of all.